Good morning. I am Ginger Yoder, and Elizabeth is off this Sunday, so I get to be your co-journeyer this great morning. And Zoom has now created a waiting room, so we are working through that. So sorry if you were there forever. I was getting a last cup of coffee. When I came back, there were many people waiting to get in. So sorry about that. I will do that better next week. Well, welcome to Zoom Church. And we have something really special for you this morning. It's a service created by the UUA's UU the Vote team. You may have seen the announcements on Facebook or in the email, and you might not have. And so if this program is new to you, if it didn't make it on your radar, not to worry. There's still time to be part of this tremendous effort to support voter registration and participation in swing states in support of UU values. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. As we watch this video from Sahana Sahid, I invite you to light your own chalice here at home.
Wow.
As we light this chalice today, let us not be fooled by the smallness of the flame. There is heat to the small flame that burns and stings like our movements for justice. Through this small flame, we hear the roar of our Black, Indigenous, and ancestors of color. Yet, when we are not responsible keepers of this flame, places sacred to us and loved ones can be harmed. There is warmth to this flame that roots us in our community through all seasons. Let us remember that as we light this flame, may it not light just the flame of truth within our hearts, but may it light that prophetic fire that moves us to bold action this season and beyond. May it be so. Now is the time for worship. When skies turn orange and apocalyptic red, now is the time for worship. When children and adults are in cages, now is the time for worship. When uprisings demand our action and justice is needed, now is the time for worship. Time to take care of our souls and our healing in community. Now is the time for worship. Let us mobilize our spirits. Now is the time for worship. Bring your prophetic grief. Bring your holy rage as we move into this sacred hour. Now is the time for worship. Let the bells toll from steeples and the calls to prayer echo from minarets. Now is the time for worship. Let us gather, friends.
Please join me in singing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. You can change the world with What you can give, no other can give. To the future of our precious children, to the future of the world where we live. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, you can change the world with your love.
Today's Time for All Ages is the story of Frances Ellen Watkin Harper, a poet, an abolitionist, a mother, but I don't want to ruin the story. So here it is, as told by some of our national UU leaders.
All right, everyone. So gather together because we are going to talk about somebody amazing. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was born and raised into a free Black family in 1825. Her family lived in Maryland, where slavery was still legal. Being born free in a land where people who looked like you were enslaved was something that inspired both Frances and her family to become abolitionists.
When she was very young, both of her parents died, and she went to live with her aunt and uncle. Theirs was an abolitionist household. They worked to end slavery, and they also ran a school where Black children, including Frances, received an education.
While still a young teen, she went to work as a housekeeper and seamstress in the household of a Baltimore bookstore owner. Her employers encouraged the inquisitive Frances to use their big library. She devoured books and began to write poetry and essays which appeared in the newspaper. By the time she was 20 years old, her writings were published in her first book, Forest Leaves.
In 1850, Congress passed a law that allowed slave catchers to kidnap, enslave, and sell free Black people in states where slavery was legal. Her aunt and uncle fled from Maryland to Canada. Frances fled to Ohio, which did not allow slavery, and then 2 years later to Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, she became involved in the Underground Railroad, a movement that helped people escaping from slavery. Throughout this all, Frances continued to write and to publish books of poetry, much of it against slavery.
In time, Frances became the first Black woman to earn a living through the use of her words, living modestly and donating much of her income to helping her uncle's work with the Underground Railroad. In 1854, the Maine Anti-Slavery Society hired her to travel all over the Northeast to make anti-slavery speeches. She became one of the most famous speakers and authors of her time.
All kinds of people came to hear her speak, but she made a point of not charging Black people admission. Frances was progressive throughout her life. While she wrote and spoke against slavery, she also took other kinds of actions. She refused to wear or eat goods that were farmed by enslaved workers, including cotton and sugar. She wouldn't wear clothes made of cotton or eat food that contained sugar.
In 1860, the year that the Civil War began, Frances Watkins married Benton Harper, who already had 3 children. The two had a daughter together, and Frances took time off from her writing and speaking to tend to her blended family. Unfortunately, just a few short years later, her husband died, leaving her as a young widow responsible for many unpaid bills. Frances Watkins Harper made the difficult decision to send her children to live with relatives and go back on speaking tours in order to make money and provide for her family.
By then, slavery had ended, and she spoke for women's rights and for legal and civil rights for Black people. She wrote poems and essays about the experiences of new freed slaves struggling to make their way despite the damage done to Black people by slavery. In 1870, she joined the Unitarian Church of Philadelphia. There, she found a community where white and Black people came together, and where many shared her passion for justice.
In many ways, Frances Harper was at home in two different worlds. Although she was used to working with white people, she also kept her connection to the Black community in Philadelphia. She maintained her membership in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, where she taught Sunday school. She wrote 3 novels specifically for Black people, highlighting family connections and choices about racial identity. She pushed for education and voting rights for Black people, and she encouraged Black children to learn and grow, just as she had been encouraged as a child.
During her long life, as you have heard, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper offered her voice, her words, her money, her labor, and most importantly, her love to the work of justice making for her people. She used her voice and her privilege as an educated free Black woman to raise awareness of the plight of Black people in the United States after the Civil War. We honor her memory and her place among our Unitarian.
Wow. What an inspiration. And I wonder what power our words have, our written words, our spoken words, to make a difference in the world. And I wonder what issues inspire you to speak and write out. I wonder what sparks your soul to use the power of your words. And I wonder how we can each use our privilege to make a difference in the world. And I know one of these ways is to vote. And we are going to learn more about that in our service and also in our children's programming today. We'll be talking about our 5th principle, which speaks to us about the use of the democratic process and the power of voting. And our kids will get to use that power and vote on some fun things. The rest of this service was created by the UU The Vote team. You'll get to learn more about what the larger faith community is doing to promote our values in these challenging times. You'll hear inspiring messages, and you'll be invited to support this effort in whatever way makes sense to you.
I got trained as a community organizer with Californians for Justice. And there we believed that people of color, immigrants, poor folks, queer folks, disabled folks, and young people are the majority. And if we organized our communities to vote, we could shift power to reflect our values and interests and needs for racial justice and economic justice and more. And now, as a field organizer with UU The Vote in Pennsylvania, I still believe this strategy, that voting can be a means to a power shift. It's not the only strategy, but it is one worthwhile strategy among many. So welcome to my field. Here with my reading glasses and my large screen, instead of my sunglasses and walking shoes for door knocking, the organizing field of pandemic times, where we gather in Zoom rooms large and small to reach thousands upon thousands of voters and potential voters. Just before recording this, 20 of us from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Washington, D.C., my own Connecticut, and Massachusetts gathered in a Zoom room with our partners at CASA, a group organizing to build power in immigrant and working class communities in central Pennsylvania. In 2 hours, we sent over 60,000 texts to urge folks to check and update their voter registration or to get registered. We texted with people who had lost their jobs and apartments due to the pandemic, and we connected them with community resources. We texted with someone who is homeless and helped them get the information they need to be able to register to vote. We texted with lots of folks who weren't sure if their registration was up to date and helped them check their status. We know that over 90 of them followed up to register. And we texted with some people who said they follow God's law and their faith tells them not to participate in voting. Dear ones, our faith says that the here and now matters. That we live our faith not for the possibility of heaven when we die, but to create heaven here on earth. What we do, what you do, matters. And so we work. We you the vote. We text the vote, we postcard the vote, we phone bank the vote. We use the tools at hand, spiritual, technological, relational, to connect with people around our values. If you haven't considered calling voters yet, please step out of your comfort zone and try it. Join us in this sacred connection and faithful work. There is so much to do, and so little time before the election. And there is so much to do after the election, because we are in this not to elect a particular person, but to shift power to reflect our faith, our values, so that we can keep organizing for a world where every person is loved, sheltered, valued, and has what they need to thrive. A single honeybee makes just 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in its lifetime. It takes 70 honeybees just to make my morning tea. Like honeybees, it is up to each of us to do our part. Let us be honeybees. I ask you to do your 1/12 of a teaspoon. Perhaps 2 hours or 10 hours of work. Together it adds up to a whole lot of honey. I invite you to come join us in the virtual field. Make your small bit of honey so that together we as Unitarian Universalists can make gallons and gallons of impact.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. As a song leader, one of the songs that I keep returning to, particularly in these days of uprising and reckoning, is Ella's Song, written by Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan and performed by Sweet Honey and the Rock. Its lyrics, which I know some of you are already very familiar with, set to music the words of Ella Baker, an organizer, activist, leader, teacher, a prophet in the civil rights movement. Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of a white mother's son, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it happens. Ella Baker's words in this song are ones she wrote over 50 years ago, but they could have been written yesterday. And I'll be honest, that reality breaks my heart. It leaves me crying out, will it ever end? For some of us, that question is one that has literal life and death implications that the rest of us cannot fully know. And as much as Ella Baker's words break my heart, they also charge my spirit. Their relevance to today's manifestation of resistance and community reminds me that we are a continuation of something much bigger, much more powerful, much more incredible than this single moment in our history. Our struggles to affirm the humanity and basic rights of Black and brown lives in this country and world, they did not begin with us, and they will not end with us. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Now, I admit it took me several years of singing these words to realize that Ella Baker probably wasn't telling me, Renwadiat Mustafa Taha Hamami, personally to never rest. No. In fact, none of us as individuals should be asked or expected to never rest. But all of us who believe in freedom, as a collective, as a community, we cannot rest. Ella's song, Ella's words are a charge for all of us together as a movement to never rest. We cannot stop fighting, we cannot stop creating, we cannot rest until freedom in its truest and most universal form exists in our world. Our faith as Unitarian Universalists who don't all agree on what happens after this life can all believe that what happens in this life matters so deeply that we have been called heretics, broken unjust laws, and probably gotten ourselves on more than one government list to make it known that we will not rest until freedom for every last one of us comes. And to be that unceasing, everlasting, perseverant, irritatingly prophetic movement that never rests, we need to reaffirm, deepen, and reaffirm our connections to each other as Unitarian Universalists. To remember that if we do this work together, we can not rest. And just as important, to be a true continuation of that much bigger, much more powerful, much more incredible freedom movement, we not only need to sustain our relationships within our faith, but we must build and sustain the relationships with communities and frontline liberators who have been leading the way to universal freedom for generations. We who believe in freedom cannot rest and cannot rest when we act as a truly interdependent collective. When we are carrying our load on the way to liberation, remembering that we are part of a movement reminds us that we are not carrying that load alone. Like a choir whose singers stagger their breathing to make sure a single note remains an unbroken sound, or a hospital that runs non-stop with a rotating staff, like migrating geese who take turns leading, following, or resting in their flying formation. We cannot rest, and we can not rest until freedom comes if we sustain our connections to one another. We need each other so that when we as individuals do rest, we know our movement towards universal freedom carries on, waiting for us to return and temporarily relieve another of their liberation load. As we count down the days to Election Day, we know that no matter the outcomes, our work will continue. We will not rest. We can not rest if we take care of each other and our shared vision for universal freedom that is possible, knowing that each and every one of us is doing the same for all of us. and knowing that our collaboration in this moment is a continuation of a movement that knows there will come a day when we, all of us who believe in freedom, can finally rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
May I be light in you. May you be light in me. Into our hearts, into our souls, let love abide. May I be love in you. May you be love in me. From this place out to the world for all time. Spirit of life, sources of all that ever was and can be, we are guided by all that is sacred within our own hearts and minds to pray this prayer and to live this prayer. We offer up this simple and profound hope that we may be light, give light, and receive light in all the places we call home and in this sacred space that reaches across miles and experiences. That we may be love, give love, and receive love out in the world. May we never forget the impact and power of our voices. May we never lose sight of the songs in our hearts. D. Blanchard reminds us that they can be heard as songs of love or of longing, songs of encouragement or of comfort, songs of struggle or of security and care. But most of all, they are the songs of life, giving testimony to what has been, giving praise for all we're given, giving hope for all we strive for, and giving voice to the great mystery that carries each of us in and out of this world. Today, we hear those songs in all the ways we are learning and growing as communities of faith, hope, and love. We hear them as little ones become young ones. We hear them as loved ones pass from this life and into the unknown. And we hear them in the streets and at our polling places as people of faith and conscience pave the way for a better world, a better understanding, deeper care and accountability. And we hear them in the silences, a deep awareness that there are those among us as yet unheard and unaccounted for. May we never, ever forget the impact and the power of our voices. May we never, ever lose sight of the songs in our hearts. May grace and mercy follow us wherever we may go, whatever we feel called to and toward in the days and weeks ahead. Amen. Ashe. And blessed be.
grace and mercy brought me through. I'm living this moment wrapped in love's truth. Hallelujah. My praise is due. 'Twas grace and mercy. 'Twas grace and mercy. 'Twas grace and mercy brought me through.
I was 13 years old when I became a Unitarian Universalist. I was raised in this faith, but I was 13 when I claimed it as my own. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was waiting for my parents to finish their committee meetings after service. All the other kids had left, and I was bored. I wandered into the visitor's corner, and a little red wallet card caught my eye. It said in bold letters on the front, "What do Unitarian Universalists believe?" My 13-year-old self wondered, what do Unitarian Universalists believe? As I read the 10 statements written by the Reverend David O. Rankin, in my heart, in my soul, as I read those words, I said, yes, this is what I believe. One phrase in particular planted itself in me like the deepest truth, and I never forgot it. We believe in the motive force of love. It was in that moment when I knew that this was my religion. I start with this story to ground the work of UU the Vote in our theology, which is its foundation and its inspiration. This year marks the 250th anniversary of what we celebrate as the beginning of universalism in the United States. It was on September 30th, 1770, that Universalist John Murray preached his first sermon on this continent. And the truth that I read in that little red wallet card, the truth I've never forgotten, is the message of universalism. 250 years ago, in the context of religious notions of God rooted in punishment, damnation, and the division of humanity between worthy and unworthy, saved and damned, the idea of universal salvation, that God's love is unconditional, that no one is cast out, and that salvation is not individual but collective, was radical and liberating. Universalism proclaimed that humanity was bound together in a common destiny, and that love is the thread that binds each of us to the other and everyone to creation. Universalists believe that God is love. They also believed in hell. They just believed that it existed here and now on the earth. The great Universalist preacher Hosea Ballou was clear about how politicians and those in power used fear, stoked fear, to protect their greed and corruption and self-interest, and he knew the suffering that resulted from that. Rather than speak of theology in terms of speculative notions of God, Ballou spoke of it in terms of human experience here and now and our relationships to each other. A society that lives out the motive force of love would be one that fosters joy and liberation and thriving for all people. This is the highest calling of our faith as Unitarian Universalists, to live out, defend, and embrace this motive force of love in our lives, in our actions, in our commitments, and in our society. This is why UU the Vote says vote love. Today, in our context, we are witnessing the emboldening and authorization of ideologies rooted not in love and interdependence, but in domination, authoritarianism, and dehumanization. And just to be clear, this is not new. It has a long and deadly history on this continent, going back more than 400 years. And yes, even our Universalist ancestors came from that same lineage of Christian European conquest and limited the vision of universalism only to white society, a limit that we are still trying to redeem ourselves from. It is dehumanization that creates systems that put children in cages, that deny health care to our transgender siblings, that allow police violence and the murder of Black people to continue unabated and without accountability. Dehumanization that allows triage protocols that devalue the lives of disabled people and that lead to systemic divestment from communities. The resources from housing to education, healthcare to jobs, and the criminalization of poverty. Just as Hosea Ballou named it, the tool of dehumanization, its propaganda is fear. Propaganda that tells us to fear our neighbor, that we are not family and kin, but enemies. This is the exact opposite of our theology of universalism that tells us that we have a common destiny and we are connected to one another in love. This is why UU the Vote says vote love, defeat hate. And while the forces of dehumanization and domination have always been a part of US history, so too have been those who have resisted and organized for the values of dignity, equity, humanity, and love. These days are heartbreaking, they're infuriating, and they're frightening. On days when I lose my own strength, I turn to the words of Alice Walker, who reminds us, we remember our ancestors because it is an easy thing to forget, that we are not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, and die. The grace with which we embrace life in spite of the pain and the sorrow is always a measure of what has gone before us. We remember our ancestors, theological, familial, and in movement. We remember Francis, Ellen Watkins Harper, Hosea Ballou, John Brown, Sitting Bull, Ida B. Wells, Dr. King, Anne Braden, and so many more whose names history does not remember. Those who struggled and risked and fought and loved for the principles of justice, equity, liberty. This is why in UU the Vote we say vote love, we say defeat hate, because dear ones, we are on a precipice. Every single one of our most deeply held values is on the line right now. The current powers in government are showing in everything they do that the inherent worth and dignity of so many immigrants, Black people, disabled folks, trans and queer people does not matter to them. Human agency, interdependence, the democratic process are being disrupted and defiled daily. It is a radical act of faith to not only continue to believe in all of our cherished principles, but to demand them by speaking out, taking risks, organizing, leveraging our resources, and building networks of solidarity and power to protect one another and these values. We are on a precipice, and our actions right now will affect whether we have a chance to continue to bring our bold values forward, to rebuild, expand, and strengthen our democracy, to confront police violence, to upend racial inequity, to change divestment from communities and make moves to protect the climate. Now is the time to draw on the grace, the courage, and the strength of all those who went before, to widen our comfort zones, and to do all we can to vote, love, and defeat hate. If you haven't taken any form of action yet, sign up for a shift with UU the Vote. I can tell you that it's fun. And if you've written postcards to voters, but you feel nervous about phone banking, do it with your fellow UUs. And if you've been all in with UU the Vote from the beginning, keep it up and start planning for how you will show up and organize after November 3rd. Because democracy will not be restored in one election. It's been under systemic attack for decades, and justice will not roll down like waters in one election. Voting matters. It's absolutely critical. But it is not the end. It is just one piece of the long haul work of organizing for a future where all are free and where all can thrive. Will you show up in the streets, set up to contribute to a bail or legal assistance fund, open your church building to protesters needing refuge from state repression, tap into your own endowment or discretionary funds to make sure that grassroots organizers have the funds they need for their work? There is so much to do. And our faith calls us to love more radically, to give more generously, to believe more fervently that another world is possible, and be willing to be all in for that future. As you've heard me say many times before, this is no time for a casual faith, no time for a casual commitment to what you hold most dear. And this is no time to go it alone. Friends, we are in this work together. I invite you to be deeper in this work of UU the Vote with us. May we remember that we are held by love always. May we remember that we are held by and with one another. And may we all together be all in today, tomorrow, next month, and next year for justice, for love, for democracy, and for a future that is free and thriving for all people. May it be so.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we cry. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love.
Hi, I'm Nicole Presley, National Organizer of You, the Vote, and I'm so honored to be a part of You, the Vote, and a part of this special worship service. By this time, you've probably gotten used to virtual worship. You've made sure your computer is charged, you've searched your email for Zoom links, or you've scrolled through your social media feed for the live stream. But from whatever platform you're entering worship today, you are in sacred space. Getting here was not easy. Remember the spring? Remember, many of us had to learn new skills and to stretch ourselves and maybe our internet speed to continue to gather with our beloved faith community. We learned Zoom, we downloaded apps, and we reached out for help to be with one another. Transformation is always a stretch, and we need to bring that same energy to this year's election. In the past few months, I have witnessed amazing things from all of you. We created a goal to reach out to 1 million voters, and we are almost there. We stretched ourselves. We stretched ourselves to get on another Zoom call, to learn to text voters, phone bank, and send postcards. We learned how to be vulnerable and have critical conversations with members of our communities. UUs, we are not just a faith community that believes another world is possible, but we are a community that is willing to act to make that world a reality. We have a legacy of showing up, and we know that our victories are never guaranteed, and we know that those victories are never won by those in power ceding it willingly. The people imagined it, the people demanded it, and we, the people, gathered to make it so. In all of our movements, the stakes were high. But instead of mobilizing out of the fear of defeat, we have organized out of a sacred calling to build a world that we know is possible. That is why nonpartisan work is not just important, but is absolutely revolutionary. We come together to learn, to create, and to put into practice ways of being towards our collective liberation. That is our victory. And as the chant goes, I believe that we will win. I believe that together, through sacred and sustained work, now and beyond November, we can call forth a world that moves towards our collective liberation. But we must all show up to vote love in 2020. That means showing up to the work that is needed, not just the work that is comfortable. That means showing up in service and in solidarity to combat a simple campaign of voter suppression and intimidation. That means recognizing that white supremacy and capitalism are the technologies through which political agency and democracy are stripped from marginalized communities. So when I say vote love, I don't just mean voting our values, although I absolutely want you to do that if you are able. I don't just mean showing up to voter contact work, even though I absolutely want everyone to join into this work. I mean centering the oppressed, working to free them all, to defend Black lives, to fight for climate justice and healthcare for all, for reproductive justice, and for safe and thriving schools and communities. I mean continuing whatever work is necessary to make sure every ballot is counted and that the results and will of the people are respected. We have important choices to make in 2020. But if we are to really vote love and defeat hate in 2020, We must also commit to continue to side with love every single day after November 3rd and into 2021. If you are in it for the long haul, if you believe that another world is possible because you are gathered in a community that puts faith into action, if you are ready to stretch beyond November 3rd to protect democracy, join us. Take the Vote Love Pledge to join a team that is organizing to take action in this election and ready to mobilize after November 3rd for the work ahead. Join me. Take your phone out, text Pledge Love to 51555 to take the pledge today, or go online at uuthevote.org. We need everyone in this work. Thank you for finding your role in this work. Thank you for doing it with joy and hopefulness. And thank you for joining UU the Vote. Let's make sure love always wins.
Right now, it feels like a lot to add anything to my schedule or to my budget. Although after hearing that, I feel a little bit more able to maybe reach and stretch. And I also remember what Reverend Kathy said about the bees. And I'll be thinking a lot about whether I can find one tiny drop to share so that I can do my part for this effort. And if I can't find one, or if you can't find one, I know that's okay because I'm doing my part just by living my values, our values, in my everyday life. I am a part of it, a part of building a new way. So let's join now in the closing hymn, Building a New Way.
Please join me in hymn number 1017, Building a New Way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free, free from hate and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Let us blow out our chalices together and say the words to embody the flame. We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. I'm so glad you all were able to come and join me and all of each other on Zoom today. If you'd like to stick around, we'll be doing breakout rooms in virtual coffee hour. And if not, I hope to see you soon, either online or maybe in person with our masks in town somewhere. Thanks.